Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast, where we talk about spiritual subject matters and learn how to bring them into our everyday life. And we are basing our conversations on the Bhagavad Gita, this beautiful, beautiful ancient wisdom where Krishna is speaking to Arjuna on the battlefield and sharing really deep spiritual truths that are simultaneously esoteric and extremely practical. So it's such a wonderful place to draw wisdom from. And I am here with our live studio audience from all over the states and the world, and my dear co-host Achyuta Gopi. How are you this morning, Achyuta?
Firmly under an umbrella of mercy.
I love
Like
that.
firmly. Totally.
Firmly. That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Oh, Krishna. I want to join you under that umbrella.
Okay.
So
It's a really cool umbrella. You should.
I'm gonna swoop under that umbrella. Um, I think that I'm also under the umbrella of mercy, but I'm realizing, we just had a 3-day offsite for the leadership team at the Bhakti Center, and it was really interesting because it was like the first time that we've done something like this in like the history of the Bhakti Center. From my short time at the Bhakti Center, and also like everyone who's been there longer, they were like, "This is the first time we've done this." And we did a lot of like team building and blah 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 and whatever, and goals and all that stuff. But the thing that was like very unprecedented, which I think the Bhagavad Gita is really beautiful, especially these next few texts that we're about to get into, is that we did a lot of like personal work around our just like who we are as individuals and our inner saboteurs and like our stuff and our triggers and all that stuff that comes out. So it was really fascinating to like hold up a mirror to ourselves and be like, what is our stuff and how does that get in the way of working with each other?
Hmm.
And I thought that's really interesting, because one, for me personally, it was really interesting, and two, from Bhagavad Gita perspective, like that's what we're about to talk about. Krishna is about to get into some of that in text 14, but we are reading these next two texts. Sachita, would you like to take us away?
Yeah. I also think that I think this is gonna wind up being a theme. Interesting that you brought that up because my nephews they do music, and one of the songs coming out at the end of the month is called Self Sabotage. It's a really good song. Can't wait for it. Really, really good song. But it's self sabotage, and I feel like this is gonna be one of those kind of themes that's gonna keep on popping up, especially where it relates to us being of service
Hmm.
and our levels of surrender. So
Hmm.
let's see. We'll see. So we're starting at 2:14. Krishna speaks to Arjuna. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. I've been learning this verse since I was like 7.
It's a good
And
verse.
it is. It's like quintessential Sunday school verse. You teach it to the kids. I don't know why they teach this one to the kids. Like 213 and 214, they really teach it to the kids. I'm like, why did they choose these ones to teach to the children? Um, and then when I became a Sunday school teacher, I wound up teaching them other verses just for switching things up. But I feel like more and more, the more I go through life, the more layers this verse has. Um, about a year ago, I think I was reflecting on this verse and I was thinking maybe the being equipoised in both, right? Tolerating them without being disturbed, happiness and distress. What if that just means actually staying in it, staying in the experience, both happiness and distress, rather
Mm,
than avoiding or abandoning ourselves and the issue
mm,
at the first mention of whatever it is. What if it no longer just means to just be detached from everything? What if it means to stick with it through both the happiness and distress?
mm. Yeah, because as we'll read later in the Gita, I think that when people hear the word detachment, it's actually really dangerous to like visit these very high ideas without proper guidance. Because when you think of words like detachment or surrender, or just like these big philosophical sacrifice, like whatever they may be, you can have your own ideations of what they mean. And Krishna does such a good job in Bhagavad Gita of like turning a lot of these, not turning them on their head, but just like getting really deep into like, wait a minute. What you think it is, that's not actually what it is. Like actually, this is what it is. Because I think with detachment, especially, it's such a big one because, you know, people speak about the dualities of life and the duality this and the duality that. And the easy, well, it doesn't seem like an easy way out, but people seem to think like the easy way out is, well, then I just won't deal with it. I just won't do it. I'll just be detached. I don't have to exist in that duality. And it's like, homie, like who do you think you are? You know,
That's my home.
like who do you think you are? Like I've just transcended everything and I no longer live in the duality. It's like if it were that easy, like don't you think we'd all be don't you think we'd all be just like transcendent beings like outside of duality? And it's like I really love your take on this because Krishna later says in Bhagavad Gita that real detachment is working and doing your duty and like doing things, but being detached from the results of your action. So it's like actually, I'm gonna do the things. I'm gonna be here in the good and the bad. I'm gonna try my best, whether I'm getting that feeling of like I just want to abandon everything. And whatever happens is what happens. Because I think that this is where it becomes really self-sabotaging. And I love that theme. And by the way, shameless plug, if you're not following Vas and Keish, please follow them and listen to their music because they are musical geniuses
It's
and
so
they're
good.
just amazing.
And
So
they're
good. I can't
brilliant.
wait
I
for
don't
their
know
new
how
song. I don't know how they do it either. But this theme of self-sabotage, it's like we sabotage ourselves because there's these two concepts uh, of raga and dvesha, right? Of attachment and aversion.
to.
So I become first. I'm ignorant, right? Ignorance meaning, from a Vedic standpoint, ignorance meaning that I am unaware that the soul is eternal, and then I become absorbed in the material body. I start to misidentify my true self with this material body. And once I'm misidentifying my true self with this material body, then I fall into attachment and aversion. Attachment to what makes this body feel good and mind as well, and aversion to what makes it feel not good or what's in the way of my enjoyment. And that's when it starts to get really messy because self-sabotage comes in the form of like, well, I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel good, to feel good, to feel like I'm successful, to feel like I've accomplished something, and etc. And whatever's standing in the way, I'm going to avoid it like the plague. And it's so interesting. I'll stop talking because I'm going into so many different tangents because they're all so good. There's such good tangents. But like Krishna tells us, oh, I won't go this far. In the verse that we just covered last week, you and I, Achyuta, the 2-7, right? The I'm surrendering to you finally. This idea of prayas versus shreyas that we talked about so much. It's like, actually, maybe I don't know what is good for me. Like, actually, maybe I need a higher power to help me understand what is actually ultimately good for me. Because this game that I've been playing of like, I'm just going to attach myself to what feels good and I'm going to avert myself from what doesn't feel good, it's not working. It's not working for Arjuna, and it's also not working for us in this contemporary landscape.
And so much of what you said is absolutely true. This idea that we think it is detachment and really it is simply avoidance or aversion toward not getting what we want or not feeling as happy as we think we could feel. And then you were speaking about our misidentification. And I was even thinking about that yesterday. I was just kind of thinking, I was like, if only I could figure out how to identify as a spirit soul the way I have clung to the identifications, all of the other ones. The way that I'm like, oh, but I yearn to feel seen and represented and all of these things. And I was like, if only I actually identified as a spirit soul who is so dear to Krishna as strongly as I identified with everything else,
Mm,
then really I'd be like gaining some traction and getting somewhere. And it wasn't to feel like debilitated, like, oh my goodness, I'll never get there. But it was
mm,
just to put things in some practical perspective that I have accepted so much about myself. And in accepting so much about myself, in which ways am I now limiting myself? Like, oh, and this is what I am, and this is all I will ever be.
mm,
When instead, I'm a spirit soul, and that spirit soul is actually limitless, as part and parcel of Krishna, as limitless as my Lord is. In some capacity, this spirit soul is absolutely limitless in my capacity for faith, in my capacity for what I put my trust in my capacity for what I believe. My spirit soul is completely limitless. And yet I continue putting limit after limit after limit on it. And Martha brought up something really wonderful in the chat. We're always asked, are we happy? What makes you happy? But hardly are we ever asked, are you sad? And what makes you sad? And then the happiness becomes overrated. And one of the most wonderful things that I find about reading spiritual literature is that Krishna is constantly walking into assemblies and walking into places and asking, are you okay? Are you joyful? Which also then implies he's like, but you look sad though. Like, what's happening? Is your mind at peace? Are the minds of your citizens at peace? He asks you to steer at one point during Mahabharata. And I always thought that that was so wonderful.
mm,
Him asking, okay, what's going on with taxes and everything? Yeah, we get it. But is your mind at peace? Like, what would make you peaceful? You just let
mm,
me know. I'll handle the rest. So we are not dealing with a supreme person who is looking for you to rough it all the time. That is not the only option. And Arjuna here, he's like, I could just go to the forest and rough it the whole time. I could do nothing. I could just live a really austere life. And Krishna's like, that's not what I had planned out for you. I mean, if you really, really want to, that's up to you. But that's not what I had planned. I had planned
mm,
the kingdom with the riches and the wealth and the abundance. So sometimes we start talking ourselves out of that. We start putting limits on what can be spiritual and what can't be spiritual, what God could bless us with and what God can't bless us with. And those are our limits, not God's.
mm. I'm reflecting on last night at Thursday Night Kirtan when you and I were talking after.
Mm,
And it was so nice because you have such a way of just like bringing Krishna into every single conversation. And we were talking about India. Shameless plug. We're going to India, folks. There's still some spots left if you want to come with
invest
me
in
in a
the
trip to
money.
India. But we were talking about India because I'm having to really get into planning mode and logistics. And we started talking about Vrindavan and pastimes and stories and books and all of this stuff. And it was so beautiful. And I was really reflecting on like on what you just said, because I think that when we approach things, and obviously there's tact and social tact, and it's not like someone's like, oh, I'm feeling depressed. Well, in Bhagavad Gita 2, 14, it says matras parshas tu kunteya, it's like, but but that being said, there is a way to start to veer conversations more towards like, hey, like, what is our bhakti yoga saying about this? Or like, what's my sadhana like? Or like, let's talk about spiritual things. Because I think that sometimes people are really uncomfortable with the like, I'm sad, or either saying I'm sad, or saying that I'm going through it, or saying that I'm suffering, and also being on the receiving end. I'm suffering, it's like, oh my God, like what do I do with this? And I think that the reason that people feel uncomfortable both saying it and receiving it is because we have this like false thing in our head that we have to like solve everyone's problems, or like we have to like be like, God, or like indirectly trying to be God. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening. We don't have to take that upon ourselves. We're not God. Krishna's God. And actually, Krishna, like like when someone's in distress or happiness, the instruction, the injunction is to take shelter of Krishna. And so really it's like, how can I, the thought process then should be like, no, I'm not going to try to like fix your problems, but rather like, how can I and us and we, how can we like go take shelter of Krishna more together, as friends, as a couple, as people in sangha together, like that's the whole thing. So all of a sudden this started to give me some subtitles. That's really nice.
Yeah, it popped. It's like it updated in the middle of this episode.
Yeah, I'm
They were
like,
like,
what?
there's a live transcript available. I was
Like,
like,
what's happening
do
here?
I need a live transcript? Wow.
I don't know. But anyway, just to finish my point, I think it's really interesting because Krishna is not asking from us, to be that person to solve everyone's
Mm,
problems. What he wants from us is to individually and collectively take shelter of him. And I think that the more we can really feel that in our heart, the more that we'll feel less, I don't know, weird about being like, actually, I'm struggling. Actually, I'm going through it. Actually, I'm not happy, because getting out of that, like, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm great. Oh, ha, 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 like whatever. It's so surface level, it's so superficial. And it's so much more beneficial to be like, actually, I'm going through it. And, my sadhana is like, whatevs. It's like, oh, cool. Like, let's talk about it, like whatever. And that's how we get closer to Krishna.
I absolutely, wholeheartedly, fully, completely agree with you about the entire thing. I think it, and it takes us off guard. It really takes us off guard because so many of us as people, humans, etc., have used it as control tactics. It winds up coming back around to bite us in the butt, kind of like you say you're having a hard day, and then the next thing you know, somebody's like, well,
Mm.
they are clearly not so spiritually advanced because they weren't having a good time and they didn't do this, this, and this, and their spirituality didn't look this way, or this way. And I don't know about all that. So we could just write them off right now.
Their association has become unfavorable.
Oh no, that's terrible.
I hate
Wait,
that. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate that sentence. I hate it.
ah, or yeah, it's like their association has become unfavorable. They're clearly on the bodily conception of life. I'm like, is this a thing that we just vomit back out? Like it really, we've got some like spiritual vomit going on. And I like to think of it in strong, strong terms like that because then you don't want to do it. But even starting last night from the moment that you asked me if I was okay. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm going through it. And then you doubled back around, like, I'm not just gonna like overlook the I'm okay. Like, are you really okay? And it took me a second. I was like, what? Oh, okay. I see you really caring for me. But it's important that we do that for others and that we do it for ourselves and understanding that it's actually, like you said, not our job to even fix it, but it is our job to actually really honestly ask. And I remember saying to one person one time, I was like, it's not my job to fix you. Only you can do that on like your side of the, like if we're on two sides of a door, you're on your side of the door with so many demons and all whatever. It's not my job to break down the door and come save you. My job is to stay on my side of the door and let you know that I'm here for whatever.
Mm.
Whether you just need me to chant and you listen today, or you just need me to tell you a fun story that reminds you that Krishna is not as serious as we are making everything out to be. My job is to just let you know that I will be on the other side of this door with weapons in hand, ready for whatever you need. But I can't jump in there and save you. Only you can do that.
Mm. Only you can do that with your like with your heart and with surrendering to Krishna. And it's like it's such an interesting thing, right? Because it's like I think when people hear surrender to Krishna, it's like, I think a lot of the times it can fall on deaf ears in a sense because we hear that phrase so much. And I think the biggest question that might come to people's mind, I know it used to come to my mind, is like, well, how do I do that? You know? And it's like study the Gita, like study the Bhagavad Gita, listen to what Krishna is saying, read the Bhagavatam, read Sharanagati, like read these books that talk about the steps of surrender. And like that's why I love Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga is not vague in the least bit. It's like extremely specific. It's like, oh, you want to know how to surrender? Here's some 6 steps. Oh, you want a whole book about those 6 steps? Here they go. Oh, you want to know how Krishna tells you to surrender? Here's the Bhagavad Gita. And it's just like, I think that it's such an opportunity actually, because there are many people in the world, everyone, for the most part, is suffering. And it's like, especially in big cities like New York, it's like people are suffering and they're looking for steps. People love steps. I love steps. Step one, do this. Step two, do this. It makes it real, as opposed to just like vague, like, yeah, I'm just gonna surrender. Here I go. It's like, no. And I've witnessed people studying the Gita. It's been my own experience as well, studying other sacred texts where it's like, oh, this is starting to make a lot of sense. And I'm seeing actual movement, I'm seeing actual change. And that's what makes faith grow stronger. It's like, oh, I tried something, it worked, there was reciprocation, and now, yeah, I see you, I feel you, I hear you, Krishna. And I think that that's super important, and it can't be understood. It can't be a logical thing. In a sense, you kind of have to go through the disappointments.
Yeah.
We've talked about this topic so much with Arjuna, of like, the suffering is there for a reason, because you have to go through the disappointments for you to read a verse like this, text 14, and really be like, yeah, like, yes, I understand what you're saying, Krishna, as opposed to just some like allegorical, like, yeah, the non-permanence of things like summer and winter, just this, you can read this and it could be kind of like a poetic allegorical thing where you're just like, yeah, that's cool, like, just like winter and summer disappearing into, or you can read this and be like, oh, this is 100% true. This material world is non-permanent. And I was happy 2 weeks ago when I got my promotion at my job. And now, I don't know. I don't know.
I'm miserable
My
because now I got to
I'm
work 50
miserable.
hours
Yeah, I'm miserable
from the
because I have
promotion that I wanted so badly.
exactly. There you go. I'm miserable because now I'm working 60 hours a week from the promotion I wanted, and I hate everything, and like this, right? So it's just like, it is this like constant up and down, and it's like, how do I, you know, how do I understand that me going through that is almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not gauntlet, not reckoning, not initiation. Ugh, it's on the tip of my tongue. But it's almost like a rite of passage. It's almost like a rite of passage of just like, yes, this is what it's like, and now this is an opportunity for you to like enter into the doorway of deeper understanding, as opposed to being stuck there. Because I think that a lot of people feel very stuck there. It's like, I'm in the hamster wheel of life and it's just everything is the same and like blah blah blah. And it's like, no, no, no. There's something a lot deeper to this. And here's the Bhagavad Gita to help you understand what it is.
Hashtag preach, once again. Hashtag preach. And also, I feel like Krishna has such a broad perspective, and we go into it putting our limited narrow-minded material world perspective, we project so much onto Krishna. We project so much. Arjuna is really at this point, he's gone into this projecting so much on Krishna. This can't be honorable. This can't be victorious. This will never make me happy. This can't ever be the thing that I was hoping for. This can't be the thing that I've been praying for decades. And Krishna's looking at him. He's like, "Do you know who I am? This is exactly what you prayed for." He's like, "But I don't want to. I don't want to go through it if it doesn't look pretty the whole time that I've going through it." And he's like, the pretty and the unpretty. What I love about this verse is Krishna is kind of saying, it's like, that doesn't matter to me. The ugly parts, the pretty parts, we go through the mistakes and the hiccups and all this stuff, and Krishna's like, that doesn't matter to me at
Mm,
all. Krishna is still looking at the ultimate goal for our lives, if we are up to the challenge of going for it. And
mm,
the so-called pretty and the so-called ugly aspects of our lives, Krishna has found a way to turn all of them into what looks favorable for us coming closer to him. And
mm,
that is pretty much the one goal that he's like, well, is it going to bring you closer? Because sure.
mm,
If it's not going to bring you closer, then I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out a way to like do some roundabout business where then it does bring you closer.
mm,
But he's constantly looking for his people back. And so all of the things that happen in the meantime, all of the things where we think, oh, but I should be detached from this because that's not spiritual. And
mm,
really, Rupa Goswami says in Nectar of Devotion, and it's like first rule and kind of like the only rule for Krishna consciousness is to accept those things favorable for our Krishna consciousness and reject those things that are not favorable for our Krishna consciousness, which sometimes includes our own thoughts, our own ideas. This whole abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Sometimes the religion is unfavorable for us to perform our Krishna consciousness. We have to make a new plan. How am I supposed to be Krishna conscious? How can I be the best Krishna conscious version of myself?
mm,
And that's all that Krishna wants. Whether it's in a relationship with another person or not, whether it's in this multi-million dollar job or not, whatever it is, can this be favorable to my Krishna consciousness? And
mm,
how can I keep that as the ultimate goal of my life? And then Krishna says, abandon the rest of it. Let it go. He
mm,
does not care. And that is one of the most beautiful things about this verse, because I look at all the things that I hold on to and I'm like, oh no, Krishna's going to be disappointed and Krishna's going to think this. Krishna's like, I wasn't thinking that.
mm.
Farthest thing from my mind. I was just trying to think, how do I get my friend back?
Mm, mm. It's so beautiful, Achyuta. Thank you so much. I love hearing you speak. I could hear you speak forever. I can't wait till India. Um, we are running fresh out of time, but I'm going to say one more thing. I really love that you brought up from Nectar of Devotion this idea of doing what is favorable for our bhakti and staying away from what is unfavorable, because earlier in the chat, I really love Baldevi. She's been blowing the chat up along with everyone else. She was just saying that surrender is a process, not a single moment, and not for most people at least. And you have to continue surrendering over and over and over again. And it's so interesting because bhakti yoga loves a good list and loves a good process. And so won't get into all of it, but the first two elements of surrender, according to our acharyas, are doing what's favorable for bhakti and rejecting what is unfavorable for bhakti. And if you think about it in that way, it's like, yeah, it's a process. Like, it's not like one day I can just wake up and be like, and now I've achieved just doing everything that is favorable for my bhakti and I'm just floating to the spiritual world. It's like, no, it's like it takes a long time because we're literally like rewiring our mind, our psychophysical complex to turn towards Krishna, you know? And regardless of what it looks externally, because I also really love what Baldevi was saying, that pretty and non-pretty are non-different in Krishna's eyes, right? Krishna can't really see a difference. And like you were saying, Achyut, that what Krishna really wants is like, okay, you're going through this non-pretty mess right now. Are you facing me? Are you looking at me? Are you taking shelter of me? Is this bringing you closer to me? Do you know that I'm with you, even in this like messy part of your life? Do you know that I still love you in this messy part of your life, and that I'm going to hold you and support you, and you just have to keep turning to me? Don't go do all that other nonsense stuff. Just keep turning to me. And it's like that's the surrender moment to moment, day by day. Because shame, which we're not going to get into right now, which is the whole thing, shame is such an interesting thing, because when we're in those non-pretty moments, messy moments, chaotic moments, it's like we want to, you know, move in a way that takes us away from Krishna. That's what tends to happen, right? It's like, no, I'm so bad, this is terrible, I might as well just keep on doing all this nonsense, and you can't see me like this, Krishna. It's like, he could see you anyway, like
I'm
even if you do
saying
this, he's
his
gonna
eyes
see
are
you.
everywhere. What are we saying?
So it's like, no, Krishna's not the judge. I think that's something really important. If there are any new listeners out there and you're wondering about who this Krishna person is in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's not the judge. Like, that's not his mood. And I love how you were saying it, Achyuta. It's like Krishna just wants his friend back. He just wants his friend back. Like, hey, I'm your friend. Keep turning to me. I love you no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's such a comforting thing, because then it makes surrender easier. It makes it less of a scary process, and it makes it more real and more deep and more fun. Even though sometimes it can be intense sometimes, but like this. Okay, we're running fresh out of time. We're gonna hand it over to Kimberly with her lovely Krishna that she has with her for some takeaways. Kimberly, what you got for us today?
Thank you. So today we're taken away to stick with it through happiness and distress, that we are limitless spirit souls, and that we can take shelter of Krishna together, because everything we go through can be favorable for our Krishna consciousness.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kimberly. And if anyone else has any takeaways, please write them in the chat. Achyuta, what are you walking away with today?
I'm walking away with the idea of sense perception. Krishna says happiness and distress, it's a matter of sense perception, just like winter and summer is a matter of sense perception. Because some people will feel cold differently, and some people will feel hot differently. And you see people with different tolerances. And I was just thinking about that, and thinking about the idea of Krishna looking at this like hot mess of our lives. And really, everything arises from sense perception, because according to Krishna's perspective and his senses, he's like, if you could see how beautiful this spiritual world is, and if you could see how amazing our relationship has always been in the spiritual world, there would be nothing that you'd look at here that could equal the beauty of everything we have at home. And so Krishna is really looking at it, and we're like, this is the most horrible time of our lives. Krishna, you can't see me like this. He's like, well, actually, it was never that pretty to begin with. But okay, cool. I'll stick with you. But if you could just see the way I'm seeing. And so my goal is to try and get a little bit of Krishna sense perception. Seeing that spiritual world and our relationship was, which is so much more beautiful than I could even comprehend, and allowing that to be the goal of my life.
So beautiful. Thank you, Achyuta. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same vein around sense perception, because we've been talking about surrender and taking shelter of this episode a lot, and I'm walking away with just keep on remembering to take shelter of Krishna as opposed to impermanent things, because in this verse it talks about that those impermanent things are going to come and go. They're gonna be there, and then they're gonna leave, and like this. And the more that we take shelter of impermanent things, we're set up for disappointment, because they're impermanent. They're gonna go away. And the more I take shelter of Krishna, the more my heart will feel full. And Baldevi, I love what she wrote. She said, make Krishna a habit instead of the ego distraction. That's a part of the surrender process for me, at least. And I really love that, because I'll just add to that a little bit, like making turning to Krishna a habit, making taking shelter in Krishna a habit, making my relationship with Krishna a habit. And that's why we chant japa, you know, that's why we're singing kirtan, because we're literally trying to create these impressions, some scars in our mind that are going to wake up our relationship with Krishna. Because actually, we are in the habit of the ego distractions, right? We are in the habit of taking shelter of those impermanent things and looking for happiness in those impermanent things. So we have to flip the script and make Krishna a habit. That should go on a shirt. Make Krishna a habit. I love that. It's perfect.
I feel like I'm like, I got you. Great. Put it on a t-shirt, a magnet, a cup.
Yes, 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 yes.
Merch for India.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your participation in the chat. For everyone out there listening, thank you, Achyuta. We will be taking a break over the weekend, but we will be back Monday morning. If you're out there listening and want to join us in the live chat, please come join us. It'd be fun to see your faces. And if you have any friends that you think this podcast would help out, or they'd be interested in it, please send it to them. And we love you all, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all so much. Bye.